morning. This is the first time I get to say good morning and not good afternoon. Welcome to Fit Chat, Chit Chat. I'm your hostess, Devondria Sanchez, also known as the Fit Therapist, founder, owner, and client of Finding Inner Transformation, where we believe a fit mindset is more than a physical way of thinking about things, but it is mental, emotional, and more importantly, spiritual. And so I'm just thankful for today's guest. One being, and both of these are throwbacks. Let me just say one more than the other, but we go way back. And so I am super excited for today. For those who are watching live, we ask that you put your questions, feedback, and comments in the chat. And for those watching in a recording, we also encourage you to put your responses, comments, feedback in the chat so then we can get those questions to the appropriate person and answer them. And so today's episode is called Caregiving 101. Listen, I know a little bit about that, but I have an OG on here and one who is definitely finding herself and being in the rim of it. More so, for me, it was after kind of reading some of her posts, and we'll definitely allow them to introduce themselves and then kind of give you a background of where we're going from here. So with that being said, I'm going to start with Theresa. Introduce yourself. Let us know who you are.
My name is Theresa Nixon. Who am I?
Where are you from?
I'm currently from Visalia, California. I was born in Oakland, raised in Kansas, Wichita, Kansas, and moved back to Seattle, landed back in California. So I've been a few places.
Thank you, Theresa. And Rhonda.
Good morning. My name is Rhonda Siggers. I am from San Diego, but I am coming to you today from North Hollywood, where I currently reside and am caregiving for my mother, who throughout this broadcast, I will likely call my roommate so that she doesn't know I'm talking about her.
And we understand and we are thankful. And if she makes a debut, we're going to just love on her if she comes through. So, wow, let me just say this, Theresa, for those that don't know, that's my aunt. And so we definitely go back from my birth. And she has been caregiving ever since I can remember. And I'm going to let her share a little bit of that journey. But Rhonda is probably the reason why this topic is today. She started debuting a little bit of her journey with her mother. And she named it Caregiver Chronicles, which I have had the opportunity of gracing her page even more so when this show was coming about. And there are some things that are very touching to me. But for those who she's been raw and uncut about her experience with caregiving. So if you are not, look, I almost want to make you subscribe to her because she has been sharing her emotional and mental journey as it relates to caregiving. So with that being said, I'm going to start with Rhonda. When did you start having to caregive for your roommate?
So I feel like on some level it's been off and on. And when I think back to even in high school, she had come down with spinal meningitis twice when we were in high school. So in 10th grade and 10th grade, my parents were still together. Right before my senior year started, they had separated. And so, but she worked for the federal government. And she had this ridiculous work ethic where she would go to work sick. And so there was clearly something that had changed, but it wasn't where I had to help you get dressed or, help you get on your way. That transition probably happened after my dad died in 2012. And I went to Nashville to go to grad school. And so I stayed with her. And I could see the decline because she was misdiagnosed in 2006 with something along the lines of bipolar, schizophrenia. There were a whole bunch of things that they had misdiagnosed, but in fact were really early onset dementia things that were happening. However, in 2017, I got a call from her while I was in Chicago, like, I'm ready. And I'm like, ready for what, girl? I'm in Chicago. And she's like, I'm ready for you to pick me up. And so that was a signal for me because she was living alone at that time. And I called her and I called my sister, and we ended up having to track down the Nashville Police Department where she had fallen. And I had a cousin, they couldn't find her the first time that they wrapped around, right? They broke into her house. She wasn't there. I told them that she wasn't there. But they had gotten a report while I was on the phone with them. Luckily, I had a cousin that lived out in the suburbs, so she was able to make it there, pick my mom up, right? I jumped in my car, like I went and got my oil change because it was in the late evening around 3:00 when this happened, and came down she went to go stay with my cousin that night, came down to come get her from my cousin's house, went to go pick up her car where she had left it, and she took me on a high-speed chase. And so where it was really very much like thinking that the FBI was after her, that she was friends with the president, and that would have been 45. And when she drove through a man's front yard and stopped, and I'm talking about upwards of like 60 miles per hour in residential neighborhoods.
Wow.
And when her car came to a stop, I had to get out of the car, wave to him because, Tennessee is an open carry state. So I was like, sir,
Yes.
I have no weapons. Please get your dog. And he was very kind, pulled the keys out of the car. I had already been on the phone with 911. So I let them know where we were. She went to the hospital, and there began this iteration. And so I went back to Chicago to clean out my house, and I got a job and moved to Nashville that spring. So that actually happened the day after Valentine's Day, 2017.
Wow. Let me pause and take all that in for a minute. Because you just mentioned a couple of things that I think not only racially and culturally we deal with. We're talking also, to me, I think it's an awareness. First of all, early onset dementia, right? So we're talking about what, in 40s, 50s?
50s, in her, right around 55, 56.
Okay, so we wouldn't even think that for most folks.
Right.
Number two, a misdiagnosis of schizophrenia, which is highly common amongst African Americans, particularly males, but we know that across the lines it's been misdiagnosed. And so the way that we are handled in that manner could definitely, put some traumatization on family members and the person, because now it's like, I'm getting treated for a mental health issue when this is a physical causation to my mental health. So that's a whole lot on top of you putting yourself in danger for the sake of trying to keep your mom safe and protected. Woo, y'all, that's a whole nother Oprah show.
That'll be in the book.
Caregiver Chronicles. Out the door. And that wasn't that long ago. 2017. No. We just slept on that.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Wow. Okay. So picked up, moved out of Chicago to move to Tennessee to be with mom. Because at this point you're like,
it's clear she cannot be by herself.
No. And cousin was like, just to corral her for the evening.
Exactly.
That wasn't going to be a source, but it became you.
Absolutely. It became me. And probably maybe 2 months in, I called Rhoda and I said, look, I can't do this by myself. Number one, I hate Tennessee, right? Okay. Like, this is like my mother moved there following my sister, but at the time my sister had relocated to North Carolina.
Okay.
And so she said, okay. She came back to Tennessee that summer after the girls got out of school. And we started what I thought was going to be teamwork makes the dream work. And love my sister, love her to death. This is not a diss post. This is no disrespect, but we move differently. And she's a mother. She's a mother of 4, right? And at that time, she had a baby that was probably about, I think Onyx was not even 2 years old yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, and her oldest was about to start her junior year. So, like it was a lot going on in the house. And like I said, we moved differently. And, like in the time that I had been with my roommate solo, I had done research about the types of food that we eat, the, different things that I can put into your coffee, like MCT oil, things that are going to kind of or I won't say stave off like what was happening. Another issue that I had that you brought up was I had a doctor that I had flagged for him back in 2015 that I wanted a neurology consult, right? Because I had started to see a therapist when I had gone to Chicago, and he, as I was describing my roommate's behaviors, he was like, everything that you're describing sounds like early onset, and I need you to get a neurology consult. And like I had, because my roommate had like a near photographic memory, I heard when the change happened, and I can pinpoint it was probably about 2010, 2011 when I heard you start repeating yourself, right? Or like you're telling the same stories over and over again. And I told her doctor, I said, there's something wrong. Oh, she's just getting older. Sir, you are 3 years younger than her and running marathons. Right. But he was a geriatric doctor, right? And so like what I did observe about the system was that like he actually had a geriatric mill, right? Like people were getting dropped off from their centers in and out, right? Like there were times that I would go in there and I was like, yeah, so about, her breast cancer. She had breast cancer? Sir, she was diagnosed while she was your patient. Yeah. Yeah, she had breast cancer. So it was it was things like that. And and by the time we were done with where she previously resided, saying that roommate's right here. Like I was not allowed to go to the doctor. Rhoda had to go in my stead because like it was a known fact that I was going to set it off when I went in there, and no longer respectfully, right? Because what you're not going to do is talk to me condescending. You're not going to talk to me as though I haven't read her charts. You're not going to talk to me as though I don't have an aunt that's also in my ear, other people in the medical field that are also walking me through this, right? And so, but therein lies the challenge, right? Because you don't want to take away what's familiar to them, right? And, just introduce a whole bunch of new, because what ended up happening, we went to see the neurologist, was that his mind was blown because he was like, this is like, I can't definitively diagnose this because the things that should be challenging her are not. And she's very cunning, right? So, when you ask, remember apple, table, and ball, and then, you go and ask these other questions, and he's like, so what did I tell you to answer? Remember? I don't know. I didn't think they were that important.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, and, like, oh, can you write me a sentence? And, her sentence, like, what do you really want to know? What is this, a test? Those types of things. And so it was, and then COVID hit. Right. And so like she was supposed to go to the specialist to get like this in-depth report that they tried to do online. But, dealing with this diagnosis is like dealing with a child with ADHD. They're not going to sit in front of a computer for you to do a 6-hour, a 4-hour consult. And, what is this about? What are you asking me? Those types of questions or plain just like walking away. Right. And when I got the report that they had sent, that of course they had billed the insurance company for, it had her listed as a white woman.
Okay.
Ooh.
First, let me take a sip on that note. Wow. So lack of care, lack of attention, running through the mill. You just one other person, really not knowing their patient, really not knowing the person that you sit with. And even though, like you said, I know she know how to get out of this, right? She will swirl out, come to when it's time to come to. But more so, if you knew your patient, you would know that this behavior is not, there's things about her that this is not her. Right. And then to get the report and it's not even the same person, they just slap in different.
Click.
Yeah.
Click.
Wow. Well, listen, we're going to come back with Rhonda, but part of this journey that she's on is very, I hate to say it, fairly normal. That you get, you have the heart with the person you're caregiving for, but the system is you're one other number coming through and one other billable patient, which we can get funding for. And, we didn't even get on, pushing meds and, do this and do that. But, this is part of, I think, the caregiver's journey is that, my heart is in it. Y'all get to walk away, close the door and go home. Y'all get to, put the nurse on her, for the hour that she's there and then bill for $400 or $500. But I got to go home to all these other behaviors that we're going to get to here in a minute. So Theresa, I think I said at the beginning, this is my aunt. And ever since I can remember, she's been the family caregiver, like not just to, her mother, which, that's kind of where I want you to start, Auntie, is that this is all you have known because my grandmother, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, she was born with polio. And so she's always needed some level of assistance. Although this woman, listen, went to a HBCU, graduated. I got the degree here to know that in a day that it was not probably impressed upon Black women to go to school, that she did that and then some, despite her disability. But growing up, what was that like, caregiving or helping and assisting your mom?
It was challenging, and being a child, it was difficult in areas of where people were pointing fingers and looking and making fun of and everything. And like you said, not knowing what was really happening, what had really happened with her. But she was an amazing woman. She had 5 children. She took care of her home. She was active in her church. And with everybody that she ran across. And actually, when you asked me to come on, and I was thinking about this, my first real about with caregiving was with her. And my grandmother, my dad's mother, had diabetes, and she had an amputation. And me and Mom went to take care of her. And Grandma was not the sweetest person. And I was a child, and Mom was like, I'm like, why are we doing this? And my first lesson, we do this because your family needs help. We don't worry about what's been said or done in the past, but she needs help. We're going to go help her. And we did. And that was my first lesson in learning, about assisting her and doing what she did, which she did a good job of changing bandages and things like that and feeding and all of that. And then fast forward into Mom, when she got sick, my situation was a little different, as she didn't want to go to the doctor. Because that generation, if I go to the doctor, it costs money. I'm going to get billed. There's a finance. And I'm like, if you don't feel good, go to the doctor. And by the time she went to the doctor and was diagnosed with cancer, she was already at stage 3, 4, high 3, low 4. And I was in El Paso, Texas with my husband, packed up and went home to take care of her. And I had a different experience with doctors. She had a doctor that he cared about her. He was just really frustrated that she hadn't come in earlier and everything. But the other situation was that like they have nurses' aides and people come in now that you can have come in now to help in things. That wasn't readily available. So I got trained to take care of her. And the nurse would come in once or twice a week to make sure that I was changing bandages and, keeping everything up as I should. So, yeah, and I got to do that for about a year before she passed, about a year and a half before she passed.
And just to add, my grandmother was a young woman when she passed, right? We're talking 40.
She never made 50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Never
and
made 50.
yeah, so, and again, I'm not saying that there's any difference in caregiving when someone's 80. And that's kind of the experience that my father-in-law was talking about. It's, there's some things that are a little more rigid when they're in their 80s. I've been doing this a lot longer. And then I know with my aunt, we can fast forward to my mom needing help. And she was 50 when she passed. So we're talking about young women who are thinking, I'm in the prime, right? And I would imagine even for Rhonda's mother, I'm in my prime and 50 some years old, losing those faculties of being able to do things 100%. And I know that's one of the things that my mom really bothered her, is that, I'm young, I work for the mayor's office for the city of La Mesa, A, B, and C, affluent, wanting to move and travel. And now my sister has to, come in and get me up, or, my daughter and my and sister have to wipe me. And that was really toward the end that we had some of those things happen. And my aunt did it, retired early. And that's the thing. When I hear caregiver, it's an unselfish act. And sometimes, and I was reading somewhere that said, almost like most of the caregivers are this informal caregiver, like they're doing it not because we're getting a check to caregive, or it's like this placement that just naturally we believe we need to step into. It wasn't, when I had to get stationed in South Carolina and leave my mom, it was like, okay, what's going to happen? And, my aunt, which goes back to what I like to call the parentified child, in clinical terms, is being, a parent before you become one yourself. And she was okay, I'm going to retire early. It was like a no-brainer thing that I'm going to see what it took to get there. And that's what I'm hearing from you, Rhonda. It was like, all right, I'm packing up and we getting ready to make some movement. And I don't even be liking Tennessee, but I'm going. I don't even be liking it because there's so many things going on that they get to legally do. But yeah. And so when you recognize, Rhonda, that you and your sister move differently, what was the turning point to say, I need to do this on my own, or this is something that I'm going to have to figure out?
Well, I think that it was always like that, right? Because as the oldest, like there are just things that you do that you move differently. When my grandmother, who was high functioning, when this is what I was used to, right? Like I was used to people living a really long time in my family. My grandmother transitioned at 90. Okay. And stopped driving at 89. Right. Okay. And she gave my dad her keys. Right. To say like, because she had told me probably 3 or 4 years earlier, like, I hope that he will take my keys when it's time. And I was like, girl, it's been time. Girl, it's been time. You've been, you were knocking people out with that Cadillac, honey, and running over stuff. But, okay, I get it how you live.
Right.
And where my dad, his response was, I don't want to clip her wings. I don't want to take away her freedom. And so she had she had retired. Well, she had been retired. She had moved to Chula Vista and then like Rhoda, like she was there for maybe a year before Rhoda and I moved back to Chicago, and Rhoda decided to move to Tennessee. So the people that she had come to back to Chula Vista to be close to were now leaving. And one thing that I had asked God that one, I kept my 619 area code number the whole time that both of them were alive, right? And I had said, when they need me, God, give me the resources that I can come when they call. And every time she called, you know what I'm saying, or I was needed, I was able to come.
Mhm.
Now, I was very concerned with my grandmother because, my dad is an only child, right? And like you said before, with your father-in-law, it's a different navigation. My grandmother was a nurse, and nurses, like teachers, being horrible students, are
Mhm.
horrible patients, right? And
Mhm.
so, like, I knew that when my grandfather, when her brother passed away in April, she was gone by that September. And that's when I came to realize that soulmates can be brothers and sisters and best friends, right? So that's a
Mhm.
different kind of journey.
Yeah.
Now, with that in the back of my mind, again, like my grandmother's baby sister just transitioned in January at 94. Her baby brother, who is the last one alive, is 89. Okay.
Okay.
And so, like, again, like I'm used to people that can move for themselves and, navigate the world for themselves. So this part of this is new. And you're also dealing with a very independent, strong personality that shows up when she feels like it. Right. And I think that to answer your initial question about like how differently we move, um, I took it on completely because Rhoda moved out probably 7 months after she had moved in, moved like 7 minutes away. So it wasn't that she was
Yeah.
far, but you also got to not be in this space with this constant, like you didn't get the two
Yeah.
o'clock wake up calls and then having to go to work on somebody's job, right?
Yes.
And one time, she had set off the alarm system, and I was locked into the house, right? Like I couldn't leave, and we couldn't shut off the system
Oh.
because we didn't know. One, I didn't know that you knew how to re-engage it. Two, we didn't know the password, right?
Right.
And so there was a whole bunch of like hoopla with that. I also worked a job that, while I loved what I did, they were not compensating me properly because I gave them a coupon, right, for coming down there to do this work with them. And because I was living at home, so I didn't have any like, or, in my mom's house, so I didn't have any like real overhead.
Yeah.
But them grating on my nerves. And then having to navigate this, I walked off that job in 2018 and went to South Africa for 3 weeks to regain my soul, right?
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, this is full time because before, like, I could make you a lunch, I could, pop up during the day, right, between school sites, and then, go on and, do everything that needed to be done. It is clear now that I need to be here full time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or we need to hire somebody full time. Well, I didn't love the job that much to stay on that job, right? To not take this on. And what I didn't know is that, I don't know if you remember Sharice from when we were in high school. I had been caregiving for about a month at the time or 2 months. And my sister decided to send me to San Diego for my birthday. And, there's never a time that I come to San Diego that I don't pull up on Sharice, especially if I hadn't heard from her, because she had been diagnosed with breast cancer a couple years prior. Well, we walk in, I bring the whole crew with me. We walk in and it is clear to me that she is on her way out. Right.
Yeah.
And so she actually transitioned on my birthday in 2019. And there leaves like a dark space that I go into, right? And I still have to caregive for this person that needs me, but I'm in this funk that I really can't get out of. And probably around 2 months later, when Nipsey Hussle died, I was, looking at all the things that he was doing in California. I knew that I had wanted to come home. It was time to come home, and I started applying for jobs. I told my sister in July, like, look, I told her in June, I was like, I got an interview. I'm going to get this job. Like, there's no question. I'm going to get this job. And when I go, like, we need to have a plan in place to help you because you're choosing not to come back here. Right. She didn't listen. Right. And so she got to deal with what I dealt with, but by trying to move, like operate two households. And there were a lot of things that were happening that she wasn't aware of, that she became aware of when she had to move in during COVID. And so that was definitely the wake up call. The decision had already been made in December of 2019 that we were going to go the assisted living route, but COVID changed everything.
Okay. Yeah. You guys are both the eldest, in your family, and I'm the baby. So listen, I know there's some things that get past me because I didn't, that wasn't my position. And I don't know how the oldest do it. And I say that, and I'm, fortunately and unfortunately, my oldest is a male. So a lot of the things that needed to be done for my mom when it came to us was like, I don't want him doing that,
Right.
And I would tell you, I could not have done the caregiving piece that I done without my aunt, because she goes into, like you, sounds like, we got to do what we got to do. Let's get it right, because operation time. We ain't got time for feelings right now. I need to move. And I'm, as the baby, in my feelings. And so,
Rhoda.
I get it. I'm not here and unapologetic because I didn't ask to be the baby. But there are things that had to be done that I understood that if I were given the option, I would not have done. It's not an option. Auntie, you probably remember towards the end, and it was the very end, Mom could not, but use the bathroom. Like, she needed assistance with the bathroom. And so we didn't have long into that. She was eating on her own. She was able to do those things, but toward the very end. And I remember the first time she had a number 2 accident, she was like, or needed to use the bathroom. She didn't have an accident. She was like, I said, she needed help to wipe. And she was like, I'm so embarrassed. I'm so embarrassed. And I'm like, Mom, there ain't no other behind I will wipe. Get over here. Let's go. But I get it, right? Like, if I put the empathy that it took in that situation for me to have, like, I had to have it, because I couldn't imagine that in my sense of self. And one of the things that I was sharing with Auntie is that, there was an article written that said, it's very different caregiving for someone who just have the physical ailments versus someone who is dealing with Alzheimer's or a mental health condition. It produces more frustration, more irritability. The empathy is starting to dwindle down. And that is real. And so, Auntie, I just kind of posed this question for you of what mindset that you have to go on when you're a caregiver. And some don't know, she's still caregiving. Now it's kind of flipped around, right? Now she's having to caregive for her child, right? And she didn't have that before. So you've went through parent. You again have came and helped me when my husband was on deployment for a year. You stayed with my brother to help out with kids. I mean, there's just not one hand she don't touch on. But what is that mindset like? You just kick into action, or you feel like this is your responsibility?
For me, it's my family, and if they need help and I'm able to do it, I just do it. Mama was like that. Mama was always helping and assisting and doing whatever. And because I was right under her apron strings and everything, it flowed into me. And then I also just have that sense, I mean, not just with my family, but when I see things that are going on or whatever, it's just, if I can help, I will. It's probably rooted in me some kind of way. I don't know. I've never I wanted to go into the medical field. I always wanted to be a pediatrician. And I never made that, but I've gotten plenty of medical experience in other ways. So I don't know. I think it's just, I just have that sense that if somebody needs help and I'm able to do it, that I'm going to do it, And I know a lot of people don't understand that, because when I came home to take care of Mom, I got some criticism about, you young, your husband, this. I'm like, that's my mama. And even when your mom got sick, but I look at how God set all that up. And I'm going to use your mom as the example, because when she and I talked and she told me what was going on, this is how God works. I was totally in a position to retire from my job. I had enough time. I had enough years in that I could retire. I was young, granted. for most people that retired, but I had the time and I was able to do it. And when I talked to her and we talked about it, and she told me what she was facing and everything, I asked her, what did she want to do? Because it was either me come or she was going to have to go into a rehab type situation. And she's like, I want to stay home. And I'm like, then you'll stay home. And I went and told my boss, I'm retiring. And she was trying to figure out ways I could fly every weekend. I'm like, and who's going to pay for that?
Mm-hmm.
And what's going to happen in the meantime? And everything. So, I was tired of working anyway. So,
That part.
well, and it's so, I mean, once again, I say that's how God's work. They had just started this whole new process that they were going to do, and I could just see all kind of things happening. And I was very thankful I wasn't going to be there to deal with it. So,
Yeah.
I think it's just, I don't have an explanation about why. It's just in me, I guess.
Yeah. And that is not normal. Some folks don't just kick into action, uproot their life, and then come and take care of other people. But I will say there's some cultural and racial, ethnic vibe that goes around, especially within the African American culture. I won't say for all others, but I do know that there are very similar responses when we hear about mama ain't going in no home.
Mm-hmm.
She gonna be propped up on the living room couch, even though she ain't in her right mind. Ain't nobody engaging and playing and following, getting no social interaction other than man and juju coming past you, running over your kneecaps. Okay. I think that I don't agree.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say that I necessarily agree. I mean, we were in a position that my mom was young and she was high functioning for the most part up into her last days. But yes, she couldn't walk with an oxygen tank to the point where her breathing was really being impacted. And as I was explaining earlier, my father-in-law, he recently put his mother in a home because he recognized she was just home watching TV all day doing nada, zilch.
Yep.
4 months, which is so interesting. He would say he got a double blessing because when he went to the home, they offered him a job. So he sees her every night anyway.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yes, but he gets to just be her son.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And she's socializing with her peers. And from my understanding, she got a few guys trying to holler. So I don't know. But, how is that stigma impacted either one of you? Or was that a thought? Or because of that stigma, did not do it earlier or whatnot? And I know we're talking about the early 70s, probably 60s, late 60s, early 70s, that, different culture too. And different resources. But Rhonda, has that impacted you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Without a question, because Rhoda had started looking at places in North Carolina. And I wasn't sold on North Carolina because Rhoda is a Rolling Stone. You understand what I'm saying? Like, she gets into a degree program, she goes and finishes a degree someplace else. And so I wasn't fully convinced that she would be in North Carolina for an extended period of time. And I also wanted to be able to pull up, right? Because what I know for sure with those types of facilities is that even the best of the best, you have to keep an eye on them. You know what I mean? Because this is somebody that granted, they are not going to give the same level of care that you give. Like, I won't say care, I'll say love, right? Because this is your loved one. And so she had looked at it then and I was like, no. And that was probably, I want to say that was probably about 2016. And to your point, Ms. Theresa, about one being an 8, right? Like, you're the oldest. And again, like, my roommate was an extremely caring individual that, if she hit a stray dog, she's looking for the owner, right? Like, and so like that was something like that was modeled for me. there was a constant comparison though, like early on, because, you know, the comment was like, oh, I took care of my mom. But like you, Dee, and like you, Theresa, like her mother transitioned in her 50s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're like, this is a completely different ball game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like for me, you know, my grandmother had ended up in Frederica Manor, started off from rehabilitation, and they moved her into long-term care. And I'm not going to say that it looks like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but, you know, Frederica Manor is not I'll just leave it at that, and you can erase the name if you need to. But you know what I mean? And so, but, you know, there was a level of care and there was a level of what she was used to that I wasn't sure was going to be met. Right. Because like, you know, but with me making the decision now, or even like the decision that we had made back in 2019, it was very much because of socialization, right? Because this is a person that knew no strangers. You know, I was laughing with Dee a couple when she first approached me, like her mom and my mom clicked like this, like they were old friends. When she had come to pick me up one day because I, you know, had been locked out of my house, right, and had gone home to school with Dee, and like, you know, they sat and chit chatted outside by the car for like another 45 minutes, right, because and like she needs that, right? Because like I've seen her in spaces where she was able to get talk therapy, and you know, you come in and the nurse is like, "We love your mom." Right. We've all said that if that was our, you know, if we were here, we want her as our roommate. Girl, don't do that. You know what I mean? But you know what I mean? But this is a social being that, like you said, is, you know, staring out the window, right? Or having like full on conversations with an admiral that is not here, right? Because like you said, like she was at the top of her field, but she actually retired early, right? And it was like post 9/11. And so like that was when I stopped asking my mother what she did for a living, because I know that there was an impact on her mentally, physically, whatever, post 9/11, because she was gone off that job by May of 2003. You know what I mean? An early retirement, like you said. And so, there have been times where I don't know, I don't want to do this. I need to be able to take care of her. This is my mom. But the flip side to that was that, you know, people were dropping dead during COVID in those nursing homes. You know what I'm saying? So there was no way that I was going to send her there, you know? So, but now that the world is open back up and, you know, there's other options, like I want that quality of life that I know that I'm not able to provide. And because I got a runner here, I don't always know that I can keep you safe in these LA streets. You know what I'm saying? And so that's really it in a nutshell, because this is an active mover. You know what I mean? Like you might stay in your bed all day, but in the middle of the night, you know what I mean? You like to wander. And they had, you know, they had found her in places all over Tennessee. Where they're hills, right? And this is flat over here. You know what I'm saying? And so like, I can't risk that. I can't risk your safety. And also like my mental well-being, being worried about where you might end up or where you might take off to. So that's it.
Hello. And you brought in some other key points about, you know, caregiving during COVID. Hello, that's a whole nother show right there. Caregiving during COVID.
You're right.
Kayla says, I understand how it's just in you. No explanation, just an urge and a tug in you. It's in me. And she's the oldest girl. Let me just say that. So I can see how that all comes together. But so you mentioned also my own mental health. And I think that is by far, even, you know, in the clinical realm when I'm doing therapy, and I've worked with people who do caregive, whether they're older. One of my older clients was 84, caregiving for her 90-year-old husband, but had Alzheimer's. And he was, of course, leaving, running, asking to go back home, you know, bringing up people that have transitioned years and years ago. But one thing that was very true was caregiver burnout. That is not a term of play. That is not a term that people have made up mid-air. It is a term that came out of people's experiences. And just as much as that, as we can talk about compassion fatigue. And they both are very, very common to each other. They're definitely in the same family with the person who is doing the helping or caregiving. Mental, physical, and emotional drain and exhaustion to the point where, you say things like Rhonda said, is, I don't think I can do this anymore. Or looking at family members who are coming and going freely like they want, and like, what y'all, listen, y'all going where? Must be nice. Or have, listen, where y'all going? And why y'all ain't coming here to relieve me? And so all of those conversations that have been brought up in the therapy office, in therapy was their time. I had one, bless her heart. We did some deep breathing activities, and before I know it, she was asleep, and I just let her.
Yeah.
For the full 40-minute session, because that's what she needed. Yeah. And when she was so apologetic. I said, listen, I was almost with you. You were sleeping so good. I just turned around and did my notes. Yeah. Okay. Full session. And so talk about that. They say caregiver burnout, is consistently over time. Like, it doesn't just hit you, where compassion fatigue will burn you down. And even though they are very similar in their how they show up in the body and the mind, the difference is compassion fatigue kind of gets to this point of rawness. Like, you have no empathy for nobody. What are you talking about? We're numb. Okay. I don't got no more tears, sis. So, as a matter of fact, I may snatch the chip bag from you. This may not end very well. So, and people that are talking to you that don't know you in your situation, you don't have time for your cries and your grumbles, because I'm living on lockdown. Okay. So, Auntie, talk to me about either the compassion fatigue, if you experienced it, or caregiver burnout. Like, what happens to the person who does the caregiving?
It's easy to get caregiver burnout and especially when you deal in one-on-one with your loved one, because you've got that extra heart in there, and you're trying to make sure that they're living, that their lives are running like they would be if they were in their normal state. And it can get to be a little frustrating, because you do realize that you may have a lot of people that will say that they're going to help you, or I'll be there, or whatever. But at the end of the day, it usually ends up being just you, which is okay. But I learned over the years that you do have to take mental breaks. You have to take time to yourself and everything. And there's nothing wrong with it, because people, when you were talking about that cultural thing or whatever earlier, people have a tendency to say things or judge you about something that 9 out of 10 times they're not dealing with. They're just making an assumption, well, you should be doing this, or this should be handled this way, or that should be handled that way. When, just like you said, you ain't offered me one time to come and say, well, why don't you just go to lunch or go take a walk or whatever? And what you don't want to have happen is it build up into a resentment, or you being angry about being there and everything. So I learned to take walks, and at your mom's house, I had the pool, so I would take the monitor outside and go jump in the pool or whatever, and do some things. But just having a half hour or an hour or some downtime is very important. And I would tell anybody that's a caregiver that it's okay to leave and go and take care of yourself, because if you're not taking care of yourself, you really can't take care of the person that you're trying to take care of when you're broke down and tired and worn out, and you starting to get short and irritable and everything. And for them and for you, for your own mental health, you need to take care of yourself, because it is very stressful, and it's hard to look at somebody that you love and care for and see what you know them to be and where they're going. And that transition alone is hard. And I would tell anybody, take some time And because if you don't, you're setting yourself up for a total breakdown yourself. The person you taking care of may be trying to figure out why we looking at each other, so,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah, that's good. That's so good. So you gave, yes, normalizing that, yes, you can get burnt all the way out, and then
Mhm.
what you need to do in order to either recover or maintain your own mental health.
Mhm.
Rhonda, how about for you? Caregiver, you're on mute, just FYI, caregiver burnout or compassion fatigue, and maybe it's both. Maybe it's a combination of the two.
It's definitely a combination of the two.
Mhm.
I think that like I've always been direct and pretty blunt, right, with my delivery. And even as a kid, she would say like, "It's not what you say, it's how you say it." And I was like, "But is it the truth though?" And that was always my, because you taught me to always tell the truth. So am I supposed to give you a pretty lie or the ugly truth, right?
Mhm.
And so, I have had to switch into my educator hat, right? And the training that I know when you're de-escalating individuals, right? And how, I have a book right now about like how to use the human voice as as a tool, right? And I get up usually between 4:30 and 4:45 every morning. And what I've committed, and this started like at the beginning of this year, was that I was committing 3 hours of me time, right, at the start of my day, because I also work full time.
Mhm.
So, and it just so happens that my job is from home, COVID or not, right? And so, like, being able to, like, having to get fully dressed so that my roommate understands that I'm at work, right?
Mhm.
And so, like, whereas everybody else was walking around in yoga pants, you know what I mean? Like, I was putting on full on outfits, seeing if they still fit with, the COVID weight gain. But you know what I mean? But like having to do that because I also get like this idea that you think I'm living off of you, right? Like, I
Mhm.
own this. And I'm like, no, in all actuality, I moved here because I also, in the midst of this transition, when I got the full-time work from home job, she was in my second bedroom that had been my office. You know what I mean? And so like I needed to relocate. It also was 2 stories and we were having too many incidents on those stairs,
Mhm.
right? So I relocated and increased my overhead by another $1,400, right? So
Mhm.
almost doubling what I was paying when I was solo. And so there was like moments of, resentment, right? But I also knew that this is what needed to be done
Mhm.
because I needed 2 bathrooms because that one bathroom wasn't working. I needed one story because I needed to make sure that if something happened to you, it wasn't that you tumbled down those stairs in the middle of the night,
Mhm.
and so those kinds of big questions that were like looming in my head, I knew that they needed to get done. But to your point, I have a manifestation coach, which is a funny, a fancy name for a therapist that, we go through those breathing activities. We do that visualization work. We do all of those things that I can imagine what or prepare myself for what will be, right?
Mhm.
Because, again, like I'm a person of faith. That's why I was in Nashville in the first place, to get a master's of divinity, not because I was called to preaching, but because education for me is my ministry. But I also understood that this caregiving is a ministry in and of itself,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so like this has given me insight into how to navigate spaces and think and you're rewired, right? Like once you become a caregiver, like there's a rewiring that happens in your mind that gives you a level of empathy that I didn't even know existed within me.
Mhm.
Right. And so to that point, like there was always the blessing in the lesson. Right. And what I have learned is, I've always been a staunch advocate for self-care. Like that was something that I always told my teachers was as I was coaching them, like, one, what is your faith tradition? And if you don't have one, get one. Right. Like,
Mhm.
whatever it is that you can draw from, you're going to need a community to navigate urban education. But like I
Mhm.
hear myself telling myself those same things, navigating
Mhm.
this caregiving life.
Yeah, both of you guys share some really good tools for someone who is or may find themselves in the caregiving realm, whether it be a parent or a sibling or a child,
Mhm.
because there's some caregivers who are caregiving for their little children,
Mm-hmm.
and not in outside of parenting, right? I'm a parent and they're nurse and they're all these other things. And my uncle definitely could have been here too, and his wife. So, but I want to read something. June 7th, Rhonda, Caregiving Chronicles. You know what growth is? Finishing therapy session, checking on your mom before working on some stuff for work, only to find her half clothed on the sheets you just washed while attempting to explain to her that she smeared fecal matter that you need to clean up. It's stripping the bed while explaining to her you need to clean her up, and she starts raising her voice. It's chasing you with the washcloth and attempting to reason with you and getting cussed out again and still remaining calm. It's making sure you have dinner despite it being after 10 p.m., but leftovers are out into a recycled Chinese food container and emptying to clear the table and your empty plate only to be told you're not finished. It's remembering that she wasn't always like this and being tickled by her cussing because as a kid you weren't sure she knew how. It's the peace in knowing that you take excellent care of her despite having to fight you to put on clean clothes. It's remembering that she wasn't always like this and being tickled by, it's remembering the way she loved, it's remembering the way love showed up through her, even when it got on your last nerve. This is what love looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Word, Caregiver Chronicles, mother, daughter, firstborn, true story.
Yeah, beautiful.
Ooh, girl, about to have me in here crying, laid out on the carpet. That is growth.
Mm-hmm.
It is being able to remember someone the way they were, despite how they're showing up in this, and knowing that it may be an element that they weren't always, right? And I could say for myself, and she, if you, like I said, you ever catch Rhonda's Facebook, and I don't always catch it, but she'll write something there in relation to her mom, but it's from a perspective of just, this is where we are and we're moving forward. It's not, once or twice you're remembering how it used to be, that this is not that same person. This, and even when she, and I think you said at the beginning, even when her strength shows up and comes through, my mom, I can say, got really, she started getting mean toward the end. And that is not, even when she had to discipline me, it wasn't this kind of meanness. Mm-hmm. This was like, this is a lot for me. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how to handle it. Mm-hmm. And because I am the baby and the girl baby, it became personal. Mm-hmm. So I can value when you can see that and still love on her that way. For me, it didn't draw me apart, but it was like, wow, I couldn't see it from her perspective. Mm-hmm. It was like personal, like, Mom, you really think I look like a crackhead? Right? Taking it personal and finding that I was becoming more distant, even though I lived in the same house. Like it was harder for me to show up. So I am thankful that my aunt was there and able to be that rock, because it was like, this is a lot for me, because this isn't my mom, right? And not being able to value that this was harder for her to have me see her in that. Because again, I'm dealing with one who is still very clear-minded, right? I would imagine there's a difference from what I'm hearing from you and from the people that I've talked to when they're not in their normal functioning. That there's a different way of communicating and being. And I know you didn't come on here for snaps and claps, but my hat goes off when you can write something like that and still see your mother and move past being cussed at, fussed at, chased. Who would have thunk it that you would be here, even as we talked 20 years ago, right? And when we were in high school, because I remember, when I see her picture now, she looks the same, and I can remember the young her, the vitality in her, and to imagine that you're dealing with this. Would there be, if somebody told you this 10 years ago?
I like, every so often I wonder about that, right? Like, would I have run from it, right? Like, what else would I have done for Rhonda before I took on this mantle, right? And one of the things, because when I first moved back to Nashville, there was this question like, so when you gonna have a baby? When you gonna have a baby? So we've been on womb watch for at least a decade, right? And I remember what my mom used to always tell me, like, you'll know your words when they come back to you. And one thing that she used to always say, like, I hope you have one just like you, right? And so, like, when I see these elements of this feistiness that remind me of myself as a kid, I'm like, I didn't know that it was going to be you. Right. Like, and like, I think about like what it would have been like to have had children and be sandwiched in between. Right. Because that is also like something that's happening like with the boomer generation, that is caregiving for kids that are, that are dealing with the issues that they have, and then also having to navigate caregiving for their parents. And so, like, I don't know that I would have been able to handle that. Right. Because like, there are days that I don't know that I can handle this. And, they tell you, God never gives you more than you can bear, blah, blah, blah. But Mother Teresa said that, like, I know that God never gives us more than we can bear, but sometimes I wish he didn't trust me so much.
Yes, and yes. And we know that he does, so you can rely only on him so that he can get all of that glory when you come fighting out of it. And Auntie, I know, without too much talk, I know, again, she's been from a parent and in a child situation caregiving. And is there a difference? I mean, she's right now caregiving. I would say this woman just shows up. And I don't even know, again, how she makes it work. I know God is at the forefront of it all, but is there a difference from the caregiving from your parent, then your younger sister, and now your own child? And even though we know it's temporary with what he has going on, it's still picking up and rooting.
It's close. That's my child. You don't want to see your children hurt and going through pain. I didn't want to see my sister going through pain. Definitely didn't want to see my mama going through nothing. But I think that love that's there is the key to all of it. Is once again is he needed to have somebody there, and it was without question. I'm just gonna go, and I'll go back to God just line things up so I'm available. So it wasn't, I didn't have to talk to no husband or, my biggest challenge was the Vader. And
her dog.
my dog, who you all have graciously taken in, and which was my biggest burden at that time. I think for me right now is being an encourager, along with this being very close to my heart, because even though he's doing well and all like that, I've seen what he's going through, and he himself some same similar things, because he's a strong man, strong young man. He's the rock. He's a rock. And so this is a humbling experience and for him as well, because, just like you made the statement 10 years ago, would you think you'd be going through this? No, absolutely not. I would think that life would be just moving on. But yeah, they're good days. I mean, and this is also, this time here is for me just as much as it is for him, because I have not gone through a thing in my life that God has not used it for my benefit, as well as for the person that I'm supporting, is my son in this case. He's doing a work in me right now. And I feel it. I'm not exactly sure where it's going to end up at, but I know that in my heart that um, it hurts some days worse than others. I am I am a rock, but rocks have cracks. It has dents. It has holes in it, and sometimes what people see on the outside is not what I'm experiencing on the inside. And I was going to say earlier, listening to you all talk, I love the generation that's coming through now with the education, with the support for each other, encouraging each other to go and take time and, not feeling guilty and everything, because I didn't always have that. It was different. It wasn't so far as the caregiving, that's just the one part of it, but on that level of, you got somebody that you can call and deep breathe with, or that's supporting you and everything. And that young folks and the community is built in that way. And I think that's so important, even though sometimes it looks willy wonkers, but I I just love the fact that where you all are at and how you're expressing and supporting and encouraging and loving on each other, and it helps me out a lot. So,
Yeah.
um,
Oh, that's so good. What y'all don't know, she's sitting right now in a away in a different state to be there caregiving for her son, and she's absolutely correct. He's a big strong Marine, and and we don't know why God allows things to happen, but we know that He makes no mistakes at all, and so I thank Him that He's doing a work in both of you.
mhm.
And just that reflection that Rhonda was able to even make the connections, like, okay, we've been on womb watch, but wow, I did it. Mama,
Yeah.
wait a minute, Mama, you, teaching moments if we allow ourselves, right? Because we can go through a process and a journey blinded and not get anything out of it with the exception of bitterness and resentment and
Mhm.
grudgery and woes are me. But I haven't
Mhm.
heard either one of you say that. It's more of a place of, okay, he put it in my hands, he made it happen, gave me the resources I asked. Next time, be very specific. Can you bring a spouse with it too? And listen, you
And some
better
winning lotto numbers. Some winning lotto numbers.
right.
Amen.
Right. I'm about to since you working so good, I'm about to put all sorts of stuff on the table. Jesus. So yeah, and this patience that I would imagine that has to be built, because I can tell you from the time that I had, it was about a year that I stayed with my mom when my stepfather passed, who was really doing a lot of helping because she was still going to work and had her oxygen. She had a system down. But when he passed, my husband and I moved in with her and kind of became that for her. But again, she was still working, and I don't think I knew the significance of how sick she was for a couple reasons. One, my own denial.
Mm-hmm.
Two, her lack of information of giving us,
Mm-hmm.
because I got the journals now to show that she was dealing with stuff when I was in high school that
Yep.
she talked nothing
Right.
about. And three, just God knew I couldn't handle it. Let's just call a thing a thing. He knows what to reveal. He know his daughter, and I'm so thankful he knows me the way he did. I think if that were to happen, I would have never went on the next duty station with my husband. I
Mm.
know I wouldn't have.
No.
There's no way. And I knew that would have been the least thing she would have wanted to have happen, despite still wanting me there. And so then when we were able to contact Auntie and she came out, I don't even think we really missed a beat, maybe within a couple months, if that, she was there and able, and within about 2 years, and it probably dawned on me maybe in 2005, right after I had my son, she flew out, my aunt and her flew out for the birth of my son. And I said, Mom, I need to talk to your doctor. Like, I don't know what's going on. And she finally gave me permission. And I knew she had a rough time even coming out to the birth, but she wasn't going to miss it.
No.
And he said, basically, she's living as long as she has because of y'all. That's all she talks about is her kids and grandkids. But I'm going to tell you, she has about a year. And I just like heard him, but didn't hear him. Right. I heard. I ain't listening. And he was absolutely correct. It was about 9 months. And, but it wasn't until about 5 months later that she said, I think I need to go into hospice. We're talking about hospice. I'm like, no, I just seen you. You don't need hospice. And I'm talking to you. But then when I went home, what people were like, she looks amazing. I'm like, she looks tired. And even though hair was in place, to listen, this is what you don't do. I don't care whose mama's aunties, that hair better still be,
Something.
but her eyes look tired. And it was my friend Danielle, long childhood friend, who's a nurse, who said, Dee, she's giving away her things. And when we all came to visit, and I had my son christened while she at the house so she could be there. And I said, even this is how I know for me it was the Holy Spirit, because I said, let her. I not in my right state of mind would I have said that. I said, let her. And she knew enough to say, I think she's right. And fast forward this story, we flew back home. That was in April. We flew back home, and it was about 3 days. And I went to my husband's job and said, I got to go back home. I got to move. And he said, I was wondering when you was going to say that. So he went on deployment. 3 weeks later, I packed us all up, didn't let my son, and we flew back to be with my mom. And I still think I was just in this state of denial, despite seeing the shortness of breath, despite when she could walk from her room to the kid. Now it was like too much. I think that was a part of protection. There, and it was grief. What I know reflectively, it was grief. And being in a state of denial protected me from, the reality. And I'm just glad that my aunt was in the reality, because I sure wasn't. And, so caregiving, I must agree, is a rewiring that happens. And I didn't have as much as you have. I didn't have the experience that my aunt had. Like, God knew that was enough for me. Listen, I can do these short-term things. Somebody gets sick, high five me in. But to go through that day in and day out, it takes a special person. And I think when you get to the point where you are, where my father-in-law was, where my old boss just recently became the last year of making the determination that they are better served, not under my watch, not because I can't, but it's at the expense of both of our well-being.
Yes.
Like, that is being unselfish, and people can look at it and judge it and say whatever, but it's like, they need the quality of care to be around people who are trained, who actually want to do this, who actually care about getting paid in order to do this, being around like-minded people, peers, and getting that cognitive support, physical and mental well-being. And it's not saying I drop you off and now I'm in Bermuda, although that should be on the list. Because I told my auntie when things got, I'm going to take her to a piece of water somewhere, because that's her jam. Okay.
I'll be there.
Come on.
Save me a seat.
This part. And they said 85% of caregivers do not get respite care. 85% do not get it for themselves, which then speaks to the burnout and the fatigue. And then you're depleted, and you spend that time you're resting, but not restoring, which are very different. And so when I think about all of that, having to make a decision to put a loved one, what would you tell someone, Auntie? Because I think people have a hard time, and emotions and feelings like guilt and shame try to step in. What would you tell someone who had to make the decision?
I would tell them, like I said earlier, you need to take care of yourself. And if you think about the person that you're taking care of, think about what they would tell you if they were watching you go through a situation like that. They would tell you that you need to take care of yourself. You need to get some help. You need to have some assistance. And I would say, when you get there, now everybody's not able to just go right there, but when you get there, it's okay. It's not anything negative on you. You've done everything that you felt like that you could do in your heart. And now it's time for you to put them where they can be taken care of and you can be taken care of. Because the other side of it is the facilities have 24-hour care.
Mm-hmm.
In my house, I have 24 hours, but I don't have 24 hours worth of people here helping me.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I would say, it's okay because the other side of it is, it's just like with Eric. He can see his mama every day, or you can go spend as much time with them as you want to, and you will. I mean, you not gonna just drop them off and not go back. You're gonna go and check on them and make sure they're getting taken care of. Take them little treats and stuff like that. So there's no shame in it. I've heard people say, "Oh, I can't do that. I don't feel right," and at the same time, I'm looking at people and they're tired, physically and mentally. And me personally, if you can't take care of yourself, how can you take care of somebody else?
Yeah,
One. And two, there comes a point where if you need help is available, use it. No, you're not shoving them away. That is far, far, far from what's going on. You actually putting them in a better place for you and for them. So I would say, if somebody's trying to make you, pray about it. If you're talking to negative people, get out the group. Get in find some people that are encouragers and things like that, because you can always find somebody that's going to try to put that little jab in there. And I'm saying, pray and ask God, follow your heart, pray about it, and don't feel bad. Don't feel bad at all, because that's what these places are there for. And it also, you can meet some very nice people. You can meet the people that are working with your family member. You can talk to them, you can know them, and they can get to know you, and you will be surprised at how much more relaxed and how much easier this process will go.
Yeah, that's good, Auntie. Rhonda, for someone who, like you just said, right? This has been a decision. It got delayed, and then now you are almost like the light is coming. So how was that? Okay, listen, I was going to say that. Okay, she told us, but I would imagine it still wasn't an easy decision, as you said before.
Yeah, most definitely. There's always going to be coulda, woulda, shouldas, right? And so, but I think that like keeping her well-being as my North Star, like it makes everything else like futile. So we did a trip to Chicago because, like you said, they begin asking about like where they're from, like where their people are. And so like I got all of the sisters together, you know what I mean? Like one last time. And her middle sister is still working at 77, okay, as a nurse, right? And it's because the oldest one and the youngest one, who is my mom, are in these states, and she's convinced that it's because like it was due to retirement. Now it's a whole nother, like we can unpack that another day, right?
Right.
But I do think that there is something to be said about being idle when you have that early retirement, right? Because the expectation as a kid was, I was told I'm not going to be a cookie baking granny like your granny was, right? Like I'm going to be, I'm going to be traveling, I'm going to be in these streets. And so to not be able to see that happen for her, right? For that not to be what this ended up being, like where you were traveling the world. Because my grandmother did travel the world. My grandmother touched 5 continents in my lifetime. You understand what I'm saying? And so again, like because I had this level of an exemplar of what it meant to grow old, I thought that I was going to get that, experience that with my roommate. And so, yeah, like I'm very much I'm at peace. Like there was a comment that was made a couple weeks ago by my uncle's wife, and I was just like, ma'am, I'm gonna go ahead and get off the phone with you, right? Because like you witnessed what I've experienced, right? And so it was one thing when people were like, when I was talking about this, or they were seeing it on Facebook or hearing it from their children who were telling them what I was saying on Facebook, right? But to have experienced it for themselves, they were like, oh, okay, you need to do what you need to do. And I think that maybe there was a part of me that was waiting for that green light. You know what I mean? But like it's green. And like again, like she deserves more than what I can give. And so I'm very conscious of like, what's going on, what are the things that they offer at that facility, right? Because I want you to have a good time. You know what I mean? Like, and I want you to get back to as much as yourself as you can get back to in this lifetime. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, and that's good, because I think it does go back to perception. It goes back to dimming the noise from people and things and places and experiences that no one can do unless they've been in your shoes. And your shoes, not my shoes. And I caregive too, because I had a different experience than what you two are talking about. Like my mom, again, it wasn't until the very end that she was unable to do some of the things, and then there were things that my aunt took care of that I didn't have to do, or even when changing tanks and getting all that when we lived with her, my husband was doing. Like I really and truly got to be her daughter all the way up until maybe that final week or a couple weeks. When I moved to San Diego, I worked. So my aunt was still during daytime, and I would just come on the evening. And, so I was relieved from a lot of that. So even my experience, I can't say, girl, let me tell you, I know what that's. I'm not here to say that. I didn't have NAM Caregiver Chronicle. I didn't have no reflective Rhonda, no tease it out Theresa. Like I don't share that. So I'm not going to sit here and even remotely front like I know what that's like. But my hat does go off, even though that's not why you do it. But I do know that, the word says, and it is not a lie, honor thy mother and thy father, and all those days will be long. And I truly believe that. And honor does not mean that they need to stay and keep you up 4 or 5 a.m. That is not honoring. Actually, I think that's an enablement that we need to be careful that society has put on us that we believe that we must do. And then because of that, the shame and guilt, which world-renowned Brené Brown will tell you that they're very different. Guilt is I've done something bad. Shame says I am bad. And if you can't say I've done something bad, did something bad, what are we doing holding on to something that doesn't belong to us? So this was so good. I mean, we could go a whole bunch of different ways with this. And I look forward to even in the next couple of weeks where you do make the assistance with your mom's well-being, what that your life will be like. How will you know to even come back? How, what will it's going to, I would imagine, because even with my aunt, I can safely say that, after she left helping me for a little over a year when my husband was on deployment, I find this to be very interesting, and I'm sure she knows this to be true. You're a busybody, okay? And then you want, your hands need something to do. And so then you find something, or when you get that downtime for a little bit, you're looking for something because, when she came to live with me, I was like, who gonna tell who to sit down now? Because me and you both busybodies, of what your life will look like without caregiving, because that is it's a new place.
Mhm.
And it may be combined with mixed emotions. It's almost like the kid who, at the end of the school year is like, yeah, school's over, but man, I ain't gonna see my friends. You got these two, very mixed feelings, but both are real at the
Mhm.
same time.
Mhm.
So I'm curious, and I may do a check-in with Rhonda, after at least a couple months after Mama's been out the home of, can you even relax at 2 and 3 in the morning? Is there still a vigilance? Are you still getting up at 4 and 5 in the morning? Same is true with my aunt. She had 3 months being away from her home, came home for a few weeks. Now she's back out. What is it going to feel like just to settle in? And how long does that take? I would imagine is very personal of what life would look like after caregiving. Hey, Fit Chat, Chit Chat, come in. Life after caregiving. How do you nestle in? And neither one of you will know that right now in this moment. I would imagine there's an idea that, oh, girl, I'm going, hey, you ain't going to find me. Look, it's going to be blackout Rhonda. Just don't even. Okay? Can't even come for her after. Don't even ask her to the next event for about a couple of weeks. Okay, she went to South Africa after they get some soul recharge, but we don't know. We may find her somewhere. Yes, on the equator.
My job, I can work anywhere in the world.
That's
as
cute.
long as I have internet. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
So listen, when I got the job, I almost moved to Hawaii, but because the cost of living was the same in LA, you know what I mean? But then I realized that if something were to happen, which it did to me, how is my sister going to get there? Right. And so the blessing is that in 5 hours, because she's had to pull up, right? She's jumped in her car and got here from Phoenix, in 5.5 hours, 8 if you were stuck in LA traffic.
Right.
But you know what I mean? But that in and of itself was a blessing for her to be able to do that. And so now it's time.
Yes. Well, before you leave LA, I'll have to get down there because tracking, it was kind of like, what? Chicago,
where's she at?
Tennessee,
where's she at?
LA.
I get around like Tupac.
LA. Okay. I didn't even know that was part of the map, but yes, we will have to definitely get together. And I appreciate you both being on there. And one thing I will say, since you mentioned Mother Theresa, there was something else she said that someone said about her, that she made it mandatory for her nurse to take an entire year off after every 4 to 5 years to allow for healing. That was mandatory because she recognized clearly what some of us don't recognize till it's too late, right? That there is our own individual healing and self-preservation that has to happen when you are extending yourself, because oftentimes in the day-to-day it doesn't get met. But a solid 365. Didn't say a week to the beach, come back. No, she said a year after the 4 to 5 years, because it can be, I would imagine it could just be exhausting, which for me, I had that point of it, but it was more so of my own emotional and mental drain, because I don't want to accept, I don't want to hear it. Girl, what you mean you need hospice? You don't need no hospice. You fine. And I just did not want to take in the magnitude of the assistance and care that my mom really needed in that part. So I could imagine. So cheers to y'all that need a year off. I would imagine that in the interim, you'll take a week. And I'm hearing Rhonda say 3 hours every day for her own self, even if it meant getting up early or when, before the chickens even croak early in the morning. So we want to leave people with something. So if you could give people 3 things to take with them about your caregiving experience, about your own journey through caregiving, what would you tell them? Auntie, I'll start with you.
I would definitely say take some time for yourself. Get grounded, and well, for me, it's God in my word and prayer time, and reach out to others. You know, sometimes when you just feeling like it's really rough and stuff, just reach out to somebody. You know, hopefully you have that person that you can talk to. If not, there are lines that you can call. But don't just ever feel like that you're so overwhelmed that you don't seek some help and time for yourself.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Rhonda, what would you leave them with?
I definitely co-sign on everything that your auntie just said. And also too, like that piece about grounding, like those 3 hours that I'm spending with me, myself, and I are like meditation, right? Like I'm reading self-help books. I'm going to the gym, and I'm making sure that I carve that time out, because I find that the days that I don't are the longer days, right? Like the days that I've chose to sleep in instead of like centering myself before I start my day. You know, my job takes a lot, right? Like, and there's a lot of thinking that needs to happen. And so like giving yourself the permission to be creative and to find that time for you is probably like my best source of suggestion, you know, because like you said, at the end of the day, like I can't pour into you if I'm empty.
Yes. Oh, that's good. Listen, I don't know who all of this is for, but I would imagine there is not one person. I think they said something like, I mean, this was something crazy. Like in the last 5 years, 40 million family caregivers provided 37 billion hours of care for a loved one.
I believe it.
Can't even make that up. So we know this is for someone who is either encountering caregiving exhaustion, burnout, burden. They called it all kind of names before it was all over with. Or someone who may find themselves in that position. And what I'm hearing is get grounded, you know, in the Word of God, whatever your belief system is that gets you to the next stage of sustainability for your own mental well-being. I'm hearing, you know, some form of exercise, moving your body. I tell people your mind and body are connected, people. Okay. One is not released from the other. Do something that stimulates your mind and your body. I heard them both say they read, right? And then a big part is support system. So if you don't have family outside of the person you're caregiving for, I know in our county, there's Commission on Aging. They do a lot. You can get signed up. You can get signed up for respite care. They have the senior centers that will come and get them for a couple hours. I know ours locally have a Alzheimer's support group that meets, and they will take them for the day a couple times a week. And a little van will come get them. And so, you know, utilize those resources. Don't feel like you have to do it on your own. Even if it's to vent, call that one person who is non-judgmental. It's like, girl, listen, you better than me. Even if you got to hear that, even though I can't stand when people say, you better than me. Let them land it on their ear, you know. Do what feels natural or good to you. I know, Rhonda, I would imagine that particular post that I read of Rhonda's had like 50 some odd comments in it, you know, with people who were either giving her kudos, not that again, I felt like she was looking for it, but it was like that support, that motivation to keep going. And then there's people who are sharing their experience. I was listening to some of the comments, and, you know, she got a little extra prayer request in there. She got a little extra blessing. You need that. So if it comes in a form of a post, if it comes in the form of a phone call, if it comes in the form of a Facebook caregiver support group, because those exist, do what you need to do to take care of yourself. And so I just thank our guests for being on. I totally appreciate both of you, not even for coming on, but just for the relationship that we have. Rhonda, I feel back a renewed connection, which is amazing because, like I said, I've been seeing her in 17 years. And we sure have not just like had some hard laughs in about 20 something good years. We ain't telling our age though. We ain't telling our age.
We were 5 when we met.
That part. And it is, you know, I feel a little more compelled just to kind of do a check-in, here and there, because just her spirit has always been very open. And when she says she's direct, she is that. And that may be an older sibling trait, because my auntie is the same way. I call her when I need the real. I call other people when I want to get the pretty lie, as Robert said. But when I want the raw, uncut, ugly truth, I know who to call. So thank you all for joining Fit Chat, Chit Chat. Find me on YouTube at Finding Inner Transformation. Find me on Instagram and Facebook at Fit Therapist. And I just thank you all. God bless you. And until next time, bye. Hold on.